on the stage for some readings. Yes? Let's give them a big round. And before I do, I just want to say thank you to not only the readers tonight, but to all of the artists tonight, because, you know, it's such a vulnerable thing to get on this stage and really be naked in front of you beautiful, attentive audience. And especially with, you know, a cappella or almost a cappella, and most especially for spoken word artists. You know, there's not a drum kit and a bass player and a big blaring wall of sound to like hide your voice. It's really just what you have and what you want to say. So I have a ton of respect for a cappella artists and for spoken word artists. So let's give it up for all of them. Yeah. And so we're going to bring up the readers, the ladies of Mixed Rights again. They're just going to come up, and we're going to bring up Audrey first. Let's welcome back Audrey.
Thank you all. Is this okay?
Yeah.
This way? Thank you. Okay, that is a hard act to follow. My God, singing boys, what? Thank you. Wow, okay. What am I? Most folks say, your daddy's black, so you black. If only it was that simple. Yes, my daddy was black, but I wasn't raised in a culturally traditional African-American family environment. For most of my formative years, Daddy was away playing war games with the Marines. If Daddy had been home more often, he might have pushed me out the door into our diverse neighborhood to play with other black kids my age so I could learn some cultural cues. But Daddy wasn't around, and I didn't learn. My mom's parents, Granny and Grandpa Joe, had come to live with us for a while, and I was content to spend those sweltering, humid North Carolina summer days inside the cool, air-conditioned house with the grown-ups. When I was 4, my dad was transferred to Camp Lejeune, the second largest Marine base in America. He'd been overseas, as Mom called it, for a long time, and I missed him. Daddy knew everything. He would teach me how to look up big words in the dictionary or encyclopedia, so I didn't have to save up all my questions until he got home from work. To me, it was just easier to ask him what no preservatives meant, or how to spell that Mary Poppins word, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But he told me he wouldn't always be around to answer my questions, and he was right. While Daddy was away, I learned all kinds of fun things from Mom and her parents. Grandpa Joe taught me how to play card games like gin rummy, blackjack, and a game he called Beggar Thy Neighbor, more commonly known as Go Fish. Granny showed me how to cover sliced fruit with cheesecloth to protect it from flies while it dried in the sun, and we used a lot of fruit. Granny would slice mangoes to make mango chutney, or cut up pounds of lemons to make lemon pickle, my mother's favorite, so we could eat it with our curries. My mom taught me how to pull the skin off the huge shrimp she would use to make my favorite Burmese dish, bazoon hin. She even showed me how to eat Burmese style, always with the right hand only. She would bend low to speak directly into my ear and whisper, "The left hand is the devil's hand." Somehow, none of these skills helped me make friends on the first day of school. On my first bus ride, all the kids knew each other already, and they were yelling back and forth, laughing and throwing things at each other. I didn't know anyone. I didn't talk to anyone, and no one talked to me. The same thing happened on the ride home. All the white kids sat up front, and the black kids sat in the back. There were no Latinos, no Asians, and then there was me, just trying to find a place in the middle. I heard one of the older black girls say, to no one in particular, "Yeah, she knew, and she funny acting." I didn't think I was being funny at all. I felt kind of sad. At dinner that night, I asked, "What does funny acting mean? And how am I supposed to act on the bus?" Mom and Granny and Grandpa looked at each other and shrugged. "None of us went to school in America, my child. We didn't have nice yellow buses to ride like you do. I'm sorry, my girl, we just don't know." I didn't know it at the time, but I was being raised as a first-generation American. My existence was an exile based on circumstances beyond my doing or my control. I folded my arms on the scratchy white lace tablecloth and rested my head on my arms. I missed my daddy. Daddy would know what I should say to the kids on the bus. He would know exactly what to do. Daddy always did. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Ooh. Next up we have Maria, and while she comes up to the stage, if anybody wants to wiggle their toes or give someone a hug to get a little bit warm, as long as it's consensual, that's fine.
Thank you, Christina. I also wanted to give a big thank you to each person here and your presence. It's so palpable, so thank you. And also to Audrey and Faith and Jackie. I can't tell you how much you mean to me, and thank you for being you and helping me write fresh new pieces like this one that I finished this morning. It's called Tradition. My mother made us wear scarves. Mufflers, she called them. She always tied the big burgundy one around my neck since I was the littlest, and every winter got strep throat. Don't forget your muffler, she'd say to my older sisters, sending us off into the Chicago cold to be with our father. He would have gotten up early, read every fine page of the newspaper, shoveled the snow, scraped the ice off the car, and warmed it up for us three girls. He, with those hands, tried so hard to be good. Until my mother had to hide the rest of the set. He'd break a bowl, cup, plate, always by accident. Towel drying dishes from the rack, he'd turn into a little boy trying to hide the reason behind his shaky hands. His mother's Corningware peppered with small green flowers, floating away from those uncontrollable fingers down to the immaculate white tile, shattering like bone into fine shards and broken pieces, as if each time he wanted to crack open those old memories. My mother, clutching the broom, would tell us all to leave the room. On her hands and knees, she'd pinch each sharp piece into a plastic bag, sweep away the rest, and wipe down every tile with a damp towel. My father rarely spoke of his childhood, but like a true Italian, did so with his hands. A slippery dish or a door easy to slam, hands and fists gripping the steering wheel, he'd conjure up his own father without meaning to. Fingers like Italian sausages sizzling as he waited for us girls, probably still putting pantyhose on. Inside the overheated car, he'd strip off his gloves, sometimes setting off 2 black windshield wipers. Spraying wiper fluid froze cold streaks in front of his face. Hard for him to see, and if seen by us, harder for a girl not to giggle. My father tried so hard to breathe as he waited for us to make it on time for church every Sunday or to hand-deliver Christmas presents to his brothers and sisters. Crystal platters and gold-rimmed wine glasses my mother shopped for at the discount store weeks in advance that he'd say we waited for the last blessed day, Christmas Eve, to deliver. One honk and we'd run downstairs to slip on our shoes. Hurry, my mother would whisper. My father in a huff would want her to come, for her to be everywhere and everyone all at once. She'd return to her 6-hour tomato sauce on the stove that would have bubbled and popped from the weight. With a cool, wet towel, she'd wipe down the red specks from underneath the lid, stand there, and stir. When Amma moved here from South Korea, married my father, gave birth to my eldest sister, my Italian grandmother still wouldn't speak to her. Chosen by my Italian grandfather to host every family gathering, Christmas, Easter, christenings, birthdays, she cooked 5 trays of lasagna each time. It was tradition for the women to show strength in the kitchen, so Amma learned the recipes through eyes and intuition, and the end from a book on her own. Now, Amma sent us off to see this family, like well-packaged gifts ourselves. Bundled up puffs, buckled in and ready to be what was asked of us girls. Quiet. We'd carry loaves of Italian bread up their shoveled walkways from the only bakery in Chicago that could do it right. Tough on the outside, right out of the oven, like in the old days, hard enough to take a few hits. When my father, with a big smile, knocked his knuckles on one with that twisted pinky sticking out, I didn't understand. I always liked the tender insides. He showed me it could be torn apart with 2 hands, sliced up with a serrated knife and smeared with oil like a balm, bread like flesh, second only to the heavenly hosts themselves. Out of 7 brothers and sisters, we'd save Aunt Mary for last. Sometimes we'd catch her frying up her famous eggplant in Grandma's cast iron, the secret to her success. As soon as my father entered, she'd stop everything, wipe her hands on her apron, and burst into tears over the bread. Out of a dusty bottle, Aunt Mary would pour him a small glass of sweet anisette, ask him if she should pour another for me. My good sisters refused. I was the curious one, and it was tradition for my father to make the decisions. As a preteen, it was a taste of what I grew used to, a period of warmth, then a sharp hit like a surprise. I learned to numb myself against the sting, appreciate what was given, and assure them that on my tongue, the sweet promise was kept. In the light of Aunt Mary's kitchen, I'd eat a sugar cookie as she'd tell us about her husband in the basement, killing the eels for Christmas Eve dinner. In this house of old ways, my father always wanted to stay. After anisette once, I went downstairs for a tour, alone. In the damp and dark, I lowered my big red scarf for a peek inside the bucket. 2 black eels sat at the bottom, frozen still. I wondered, did he strangle them with his hands or cut them off at the throat? I knew I'd regret if I didn't ask my uncle, so I did. How do you do it? I knew it was tradition and that he was trying to do good with his hands. Still, I imagined them splashing cold water in his face when the time came. My uncle's name was the same as my father's, Vince. I don't remember his answer, but when he smiled, I backed away, wanting Christmas Eve at home. He pointed to a dark barrel. "That's where we make the wine, from imported red grapes," he said. "My family, the kind that stains your hands the more you squeeze." Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Next up, we have Jackie. Let's give her a round of applause.
Yeah. So mixed race identity, fucked up parenting goes together, right? This is called squash. "Sit up straight," Daddy hissed, and I miserably unslouched my back in the chair. I slowly moved a morsel of corn onto my fork, trying to disguise the pile of untouched squash that sat there on the edge of my plate like a steaming pile of shit on a sidewalk. "Stop scraping the plate," Daddy hissed. I never liked vegetables much, but I particularly despised squash. Squash! Even the word could make me feel nauseous. Mom cooked it into a watery, flavorless mush, and just looking at it, my tongue could taste its vomitous flavor. I'd eaten around it, every last bit of meat and rice, the last few kernels of corn, until all that was left was the pile of squash. "Clean your plate," Daddy commanded, and his teeth hit hard on the T like he spat. My mouth twitched, my stomach turned inside out. I couldn't bring my hand to touch the fork. "I said eat it," Daddy said. His words landed with the impact of a slap. I was nauseous and trembling like he literally wanted me to eat shit, but I swallowed back my fear. I snatched up my fork, scooped up the squash, and shoveled it into my mouth. I tried to choke it down without tasting to get the offensive, mushed up, squashed up pile of yuck from gullet to gut without touching my tongue, and on the last forkful, I gulped in triumph. All of it, clean plate, gone, and looked up at my sisters. Kristen gave me a wry little smile. Sympathetic twist of her lips. Mo stared at me, with her big hazel eyes wide and sad. Mom nodded and smiled encouragement as I slurped some water to shove the last lump all the way down. The corners of my lips tugged and my stomach heaved, regesting food and fear as the watery mush spewed back onto the plate. I caught the remains in my napkin streaming through my shaky hands. Mom, I sniveled, looking for the gentle hands that soothed away my sickness. Streaks of squash smeared across my face, watery squash coming through my nose, and tears blurring my eyes. How many times I have to tell you, Daddy yelled as his hand slammed into my face. My head reeled back and I couldn't see or breathe. I didn't ask to be excused. I tore blind to the bathroom, gooey with vomit, snot, and tears. The rest of the squash landed in the cool toilet bowl, and I sat on the cold floor until my insides were empty. After it was over, my guts quivered still with rage and hate.
Right.
All right, last up, but certainly not least, we have Faith. Please give her a round of applause.
All right. Christina, this has been amazing. I want you to curate all my parties, my birthday, everything. This music has been amazing. Oh, wait, I got my hair did. I can't even hide that, right? So, yeah. So, you can grow up with your dad, or you can grow up without your dad. The answer is always going to be some sort of body fluid exploding. So, I'm just saying. So this is an excerpt from my story called Snails. On this, my third visit to my father's home in Nigeria, I meet my brother's fiancée, noticeably pregnant, with 4-inch heels and a shiny black weave. She lounges on the porch of our father's newly painted bungalow. Ah, Faith, I hope you have brought me something very good from America, she says with a smile that feels like a threat. I told all my friends I have an American sister-in-law. I shudder to think that this is our bride. 4 days after the wedding, the day of the great bride soup, Daddy shuffles out into the courtyard to join my brother, who is perched on a stool in his pajamas drinking schnapps for breakfast. Nearby, our bride cooks us her first soup. Several house girls and cousins have been rounded up to aid in the endeavor, which by all the moaning and sighing and declarations of great suffering and exhaustion being performed by our bride appears to be an epic undertaking. Neon orange palm oil is being drizzled into pots. Onions and peppers and dried crayfish are being ground in blenders. Small green boughs of oha are being stripped of leaves. Bright white buds of cocoyam are being pounded to paste in mortars. Dried Nigerian stockfish is coming to life in pans of boiling water. Tiny knots of fluorescent blue snails are being flushed of grit. Our bride, hand to hairnet, shrieks, "We prepare it differently on my side!" Between feigned bouts of fainting. I'm telling you, you will love it. When she sees me roll my eyes, my stepmother steps in. Daddy, she cajoles, our bride is making a very good soup that you should be prepared to take. Take it where? He quips, slaying the crowd. Where does this soup want to go? Daddy! Our bride purrs, teeth hidden. I hope you can eat my very good soup, that nothing in it disagrees with you. Daddy ignores her. Instead, he turns to me and switches to the Queen's English, an intimidation tactic from his years as Commissioner of Education. So, young lady, who is your father? He peers closely at me and I hold my breath, willing him back to us. I know him, don't I? I bite my lip and nod, praying for the spell to break. After dinner, he refuses to take his medicine, knocking the glass out of my sister's hand and shouting that the Nigerian Federalists are trying to poison him. Each night, he relives this civil war. Our bride intercedes, playing the devoted daughter-in-law, her performance high-pitched and cloying. Daddy! She screeches, I brought you banana, so you can take this small pill, and then you can have it. Aha! That's the very reason I should not, he lobs back, withered arms crossed. Waving a dull knife and a platter of papaya, she says, I'm preparing poo for you. She chirps at a frequency that drives dogs and sisters-in-law mad. Daddy! I'm sure you will like. Popo is my worst enemy. I smile, even half out of his mind he can smell rotten stockfish. That night, the great bride soup exits my body out of every available orifice. I crouch in the bathroom for what feels like hours, plastic buckets positioned strategically. The great bride soup reappears virtually intact. Orange palm oil slimes down my legs. Green hoja leaves flake to the floor. Lumps of off-white cocoyam plop out like beaten slugs, followed by blips of blue snail, looking like eyes that regard me reproachfully.
Wow. Thank you to the ladies of Mixed Rights. I'm hungry. Yeah, No, seriously though, let's give a big round of applause for all of the readers tonight. Thank you to Maria for organizing, to Faith, Jackie, and Audrey. Thank you so much. And for all of you beautiful people that are over there, come on in. There's plenty of room.